Okay, so I have to be completely honest with you right off the bat today.
Oh.
Yeah, no. Usually when we sit down to curate the stack for these deep dives, we're looking for a specific concept, right?
Right, like a broad historical theme.
Exactly. Something like the geopolitics of semiconductors or, the history of sourdough. We look for the topic first and the people second. But today I admit I was initially hooked by the name.
It is a pretty spectacular name. It sounds like a creation from a writer's room.
Exactly. It sounds like something out of a comic book or maybe a created player in a video game
Right.
where you just max out all the stats. Keith Endzone Jones.
Right.
You hear that and you think, okay, this is folklore. This is a tall tale from the playground. But the more we looked into the source material, the biographical records, the college archives, the legal documents, the more I realized that the nickname wasn't just branding.
No, not at all.
It was a statistical reality.
It was a literal descriptor. We are talking about an athlete who, at his peak, was finding the end zone with a frequency that defied statistical probability. But I think if we just stop at the cool nickname, we miss the much darker, more complex story underneath all of that.
Right. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We aren't just here to read a highlight reel. We want to unpack the trajectory of a high-performance athlete who bridged the gap between raw amateur talent and the brutal business realities of the NFL in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to talk about speed.
We do, and we need to be careful here because I think in our modern era, we've become totally desensitized to speed.
Oh, absolutely.
We watch the NFL Combine on TV, we see a ticker flash 4.28, and we just scroll past it on our phones while eating a sandwich. We have normalized the extraordinary.
How do we take it for granted?
Completely. But we're discussing Keith Jones in 1985. We need to contextualize the physics of what he was actually doing.
Well, the number in the stack, the official time, is 4.33 seconds in the 40-yard dash.
Which is elite today.
Yeah.
But in 1985, it was alien. You have to consider the surface and the timing technology of that era. In the mid-'80s, we were often dealing with first-generation AstroTurf.
Which is basically concrete painted green, right?
Exactly. It was just a thin carpet over asphalt. And the timing systems didn't have the laser start precision we have today. So if 4.33 on that surface, with that technology, it suggests a level of explosiveness that is almost difficult to quantify.
And that time broke the University of Nebraska record held by Irving Fryer, who was a legend in his own right. But this brings up the first major insight regarding athletic development that we pull from the sources. We usually associate mass with force. In football, big hits mean big mass. But Jones was 5'9", 476 pounds.
Very slight for the sport.
Right, so biomechanically, how does a frame that slight generate that kind of propulsion?
It really comes down to the power-to-weight ratio and fast-twitch fiber composition. The sources from the Nebraska Strength and Conditioning Archives, which are legendary, by the way. Nebraska essentially invented modern football conditioning.
Yeah, they were way ahead of their time.
Yeah, they were. And those archives note that Jones wasn't a grinder. He was a sprinter. I mean, he won the Big 8 indoor 60-yard dash in 6.23 seconds.
Wow.
To do that, your muscles have to fire with an explosiveness that is almost entirely genetic. You can't teach that twitch. You can refine it, but you can't manufacture it in a weight room.
So we have this character with a superhero name and superhero speed. But as we went through the archives, specifically looking at the NFL transaction reports from the Rams, the Browns, the Cowboys, a completely different story started to emerge.
A much more sobering one.
Exactly. It feels like there is this central tension running through his entire life. On one side, you have this Hall of Fame potential. I mean, people in the archives were constantly comparing him to Gale Sayers.
Which, if you are from that area, is the highest praise you can possibly get.
But on the other side, you have the absolute fragility of the human body and the severe lack of labor rights for players back then.
And that's the core of it. We are going to look at how a player goes from being an untouchable icon in the Big 8 conference to fighting for his literal paycheck in an arbitration hearing.
Yeah.
It touches on injury management, the pre-salary cap era, and the Plan B free agency system. It's a story about resilience, sure, but it's really a story about what the game takes from you.
Let's rewind to the beginning so we can see how this all built up. Omaha, Nebraska, born in 1966. What do the biographical records tell us about the environment that produced this kind of speed?
Well, the family dynamic is really important for understanding his psychological drive. He was the youngest of 7 children.
7 kids. That is a loud house.
It's a highly competitive house, and he was raised by a single mother. His father left in 1966 right around the exact time Keith was born, so his mother was the absolute anchor of the family.
Mm-hmm.
When you are the youngest of 7, you are constantly fighting for resources, for attention, for physical space. You learn to be quick or you get crushed by your older siblings.
And that desire to carve out his own path shows up really early. I found this part of his biography fascinating because it's essentially the first major fork in the road of his life.
Right, the high school decision.
Exactly. He's finishing junior high, getting ready for high school, and he has a choice to make regarding where he plays.
The choice between Omaha Benson and Omaha Central.
Now, looking at the logic of a 14 or 15-year-old kid, Benson seems like the painfully obvious choice. His older brother Lee is already there.
Right.
Lee's a year older. He's on the team. And apparently, the coaches at Benson were rolling out the red carpet for Keith. They were telling him, come here, you'll play immediately. Sophomore year, you were on the field.
Which, for a teenager, is usually the ultimate selling point. Immediate gratification. Glory right now. You get to wear the varsity jacket 2 years early and be the big man on campus.
Exactly. But he doesn't go to Benson. He chooses Omaha Central. Why?
Because Central offered the exact opposite of immediate gratification. Their program was known for being incredibly restrictive. They basically told him, if you come here, you don't just play. You have to lift weights. You have to prove it.
You have to earn it.
You have to earn the right to even step on the practice field. They had a strict policy where sophomores rarely, if ever, played varsity.
That is such a remarkably mature decision for a teenager to make. To look at the easy path playing with your brother starting day one and say, no, I'm going to go to the place that's going to make me work harder.
Yeah.
It suggests he wasn't just relying on his natural talent. He was actively looking for discipline.
It shows an innate understanding of delayed gratification. He was willing to sacrifice the short-term spotlight for long-term athletic development. And ironically, that decision to go to the harder school is what eventually led to the spotlight finding him anyway.
Right. But it didn't happen overnight.
No, and that's the funny thing about the end zone nickname. It didn't start as a compliment for a star player.
No. It started as teasing.
Right. He didn't even play much football until his junior year. But by his senior year, he starts getting the ball and he starts scoring. The other kids were calling him end zone because that's the only place he seemed to end up. But it was playful. It was just banter among friends.
Until the numbers started to get silly.
The senior year breakout is statistically absurd. We really need to dwell on these numbers for a second because they sound totally fake.
They really do.
In the Metro Conference, his senior year, he rushed for 1,710 yards.
Which is a solid season for a college player playing 12 games. For a high school kid playing fewer games, that is a massive load.
But look at the average. He was averaging 190 yards per game.
190 yards a game, that is an entire offense for most high school teams.
And he was averaging 9.1 yards per carry.
So almost a first down every single time he touched the ball.
Basically, yes. Every time they handed him the ball, he got a first down. He scored 18 touchdowns that season, and 11 of them were plays of over 35 yards.
That is the wow moment. That's where the speed we talked about earlier really shows up on paper. He's not just grinding out 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He's breaking away. If he gets into the open field, he is simply gone.
And that is what triggered the Gale Sayers comparisons. Now, for you listening, if you don't know the deep history of the gridiron, Gale Sayers is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, arguably one of the most graceful runners in the history of the sport.
Kansas Comet.
Exactly. And he was also an Omaha Central star. So to be a high school kid in Omaha and be mentioned in the exact same breath as Sayers, that is a very heavy crown to wear.
It really is. And looking at the notes, there's a bit of a debate in the local records about whether he broke Sayers' specific record or Terry Evans' record.
Right.
But the point stands, he was performing at a level that recalled the greatest player to ever come out of that city.
It firmly established his elite status. He wasn't just a good local player anymore. He was a genuine phenomenon. And that brings us to the next big decision in the timeline, which is college.
Being an Omaha kid, the end zone phenomenon, you have to assume Nebraska, the Cornhuskers, is the absolute goal. It's practically a religion in that state. But he actually heavily considered going to the University of Washington, right?
He did. He was recruited by the Huskies.
Right.
And he really liked Seattle. He liked the mountains, the water, the nature. It was a very different environment from the flat plains of Nebraska.
So why stay? Why turn down the Pacific Northwest?
Family. Again, we go right back to that family dynamic we discussed earlier. He wanted his mother and his siblings to be able to see him play. If he goes to Seattle, they can't make that trip every weekend.
It's too expensive.
Right. But if he goes to Lincoln, which is just down the road, they can be there every single Saturday. Plus, he rejoined his brother Lee, who was already playing defensive tackle for the Cornhuskers.
So he arrives in Lincoln in 1984.
Yeah.
He's the hometown hero. He probably walks onto campus expecting to own the place, right?
Actually, the exact opposite. According to the archives, he was incredibly insecure when he arrived. He showed up at 5'9", 176 pounds.
Well,
In the world of Big 8 college football, that is tiny.
now you're playing against grown men.
He looked around at the size of the linemen and the linebackers, guys who were 6'4" to 240, 250 pounds, and he felt completely physically unprepared. He fully expected to just play on the junior varsity team.
Which he did, but very briefly.
Very briefly. He played 2 JV games. And in true Keith Jones fashion, he ran for 240 yards and 4 touchdowns in those 2 games. It was immediately clear he was way too good for JV.
And this sets up a pattern that we're going to see repeated throughout his entire career.
Okay.
The idea of the opportunity arising from chaos. He gets promoted to varsity, but not just because he was playing well.
Right, it was because of attrition. Paul Miles, who was ahead of him on the depth chart, separated his shoulder against Syracuse. Suddenly, there is a spot open. Jones gets the call. He letters as a freshman, rushing for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. He proved he belonged despite the lack of size.
Then comes 1985, sophomore year. This is where things really start to heat up. He has a choice again. He could redshirt, sit out a year, get bigger in the weight room, save a year of eligibility.
But he elects to play. He backs himself. He starts as the number 3 I-back, then quickly moves to number 2. But the moment that really etched him into Nebraska lore happened on November 16th against Kansas.
Oh, the kickoff return.
The kickoff return, 98 yards, touchdown. Now, the context here is that Nebraska had gone 4 full years without a kickoff return for a touchdown, not since Mike Rozier did it in 1981. Jones catches it, hits the gas, and 4.33 seconds later, he's in the end zone.
But this brings up a massive paradox, doesn't it? And I think this is the key takeaway for you listening regarding athletic development.
Yep.
You have a body built for linear speed, lean, efficient, fast twitch. But you're putting it into a sport, Big 8 football, that is entirely based on collision and attrition.
Precisely. And that is the central tension of Keith Jones's entire existence as an athlete. To be the sprinter he was, he had to be light. To survive the hits from Oklahoma and Colorado linebackers, he needed armor. He needed bulk.
You can't have both.
The human body struggles to serve 2 masters. If you add 20 pounds of muscle to protect your skeleton, you alter the torque on your joints, and you potentially lose that 4.33 burst.
So when Coach Tom Osborne eventually tells him to quit the track team by his senior year, it wasn't just about time management. It was a physiological ultimatum.
It was a direct admission from the coaching staff that you cannot be elite at both without breaking. And as we'll see later in the medical reports, breaking became the recurring theme of his life.
Which makes sense, especially as his role on the football team grew.
Yeah.
Junior year, 1986. This is the year he becomes the guy. But again, it starts with someone else's misfortune.
Doug Dubose. He was the established star. Coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, he tears his knee up in the very first scrimmage of the season, just like that Keith Jones is the starter.
And he didn't just fill in. He dominated the conference.
He led the entire Big 8 conference in rushing yards per game with 83.0. He finished the season with 830 yards and 14 touchdowns. But, and this is the heavy foreshadowing we alluded to earlier, he was playing through significant pain the entire time.
Yeah, reading the medical report for that junior season is painful just to look at. Ligament damage in his thumb that required actual surgery mid-season.
He missed a game for that.
And then he played the final regular season games with a special cast on his hand. How do you hold on to a football with a cast?
It's incredibly difficult. You lose all tactile sensation.
And then a deep thigh bruise before the Sugar Bowl.
That thigh bruise severely limited him in the bowl game. So even as he is ascending to national stardom, his body is taking an absolute beating. He is durable enough to play, but he is constantly managing something broken or bruised. This is the reality of being a sub-200-pound running back. You are a sports car being used as a battering ram.
Which brings us to 1987, senior year, the absolute peak of his amateur career.
This is the masterpiece season. He rushes for 1,232 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's ranked 8th in the entire nation in rushing. But if you ask any Nebraska fan from that era about Keith Jones, they aren't going to quote the season stats. They are going to tell you about one specific game.
Colorado game.
The Colorado game. Regular season finale. A massive rivalry with huge stakes. And Keith Jones just explodes on the field.
Career highs across the board, right?
26 carries, 248 yards, 2 massive touchdowns, one from 50 yards out, one from 44 yards out. He was completely unstoppable. It was the perfect synthesis of that decision to go to Central. The track speed and the sheer toughness he built playing through all those injuries.
And when he graduated, he was third all-time in school history for rushing yards. He passed Roger Craig. He was behind only Mike Rozier and I Am Hip. That is elite company to keep.
It really is. He left college as a verifiable star. He had the stats, he had the tape, and he had the measurables with that 40-yard dash time. You would think the NFL would be rolling out the red carpet for a guy like that.
But the NFL draft is a humbling experience. It's the ultimate reality check for these guys.
It is, and this is where the story firmly shifts from a sports glory narrative to a dark business survival story.
So the 1988 draft, where does Keith Jones go?
He waits, and he waits. And finally, in the 6th round, 147th overall, he gets picked by the Los Angeles Rams.
6th round. For a guy who ran a 4.33 and dominated the Big Eight, was it just the size issue?
It was likely the size combined with the well-documented injury history we just mentioned.
Yeah.
But also look at the situation he was drafted into. The Rams had what you'd call a crowded room.
Crowded is an understatement.
They already had Charles White and Greg Bell, both proven 5,000-yard rushers. And in the exact same draft, they had taken Gaston Green in the 1st round.
So Jones is coming into camp as the 4th option at best.
At best. And then the injury loop begins.
This was the most frustrating part of the research for me. You see a guy with so much raw talent just getting chewed up and stuck in the gears of the NFL roster management machine.
The rookie season, he hurts his ankle, goes straight to injured reserve. The Rams release him. He clears waivers. They re-sign him. He gets hurt again, placed right back on IR.
It sounds emotionally exhausting.
It is the precarious life of a late-round pick. If you are a first-round pick, the team has a massive financial investment in you. They will wait for you to heal. They will rehab you. If you are a 6th-round pick, you're entirely disposable. One bad ankle sprain can end your career before it even starts.
But he doesn't quit. 1989 rolls around, and he moves to the Cleveland Browns. And here is where we see that term Plan B come up in the transaction reports. I really want to dive into that term because unless you were a labor lawyer following sports in 1989, that phrase might not land for you. This wasn't free agency as we know it today, was it?
Not at all. And to understand why Jones's professional career unfolded the way it did, you really have to understand the Plan B system. It was a stopgap measure instituted by the NFL owners.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, the courts had struck down the Rizzo rule, which basically made it impossible for players to switch teams without the new team giving up massive compensation. The owners needed a new system that looked like freedom to the courts but maintained their control over the labor force.
So how did Plan B actually work in practice?
Each team was allowed to protect 37 players on their active roster. If you were in that top 37, you couldn't go anywhere. You were the exclusive property of the team. But if you were player 38, 39, or 40, you were designated Plan B. You were unprotected. You could go market yourself to other teams.
That sounds like a harsh designation. It's basically the team publicly saying, we value you, but not enough to actually lock you down.
It was a scarlet letter, professionally speaking. It signaled to the rest of the league that you were expendable. But for a guy like Keith Jones, who had the talent but was buried behind massive depth charts, it was a lifeline. It allowed him to leverage the open market. He signed with Cleveland for $155,000 plus a $15,000 signing bonus.
Which isn't bad money at all for 1989, but he walks right into another fierce competition.
The Browns trade up in the draft to get Eric Metcalf, who is a first-rounder. So once again, Jones is the underdog. Metcalf is the shiny new toy that the front office is invested in.
But Metcalf holds out for more money. And Kevin Mack, the veteran fullback, gets suspended for legal issues.
And suddenly the door cracks open just a bit. Jones runs for 133 yards in a preseason game. He proves to the coaching staff, hey, I am still that exact same guy from the Colorado game.
I love how he adapted in Cleveland, though. He didn't become the superstar starter, but he found a way to stay on the field and make himself useful.
He became a special teams ace. Think about the ego check here. This is a guy who rushed for 1,700 yards in high school and 1,200 in college, and now he's doing the grueling, dirty work of running down punts.
Right.
He was second on the team in special teams tackles with 21. He blocked a punt against Indianapolis that was recovered for a touchdown.
That shows a complete lack of ego. It shows he just wanted to be a football player regardless of the role.
It shows incredible resilience. He pivoted from star runner to utility weapon, and that specific versatility is what finally caught the eye of the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, here we go. 1990. The Dallas Cowboys, when you read the notes, this really feels like the major turning point.
It was absolutely supposed to be the big break. He signs as a Plan B free agent yet again. But look at the contract this time. 2 years, $800,000, plus an $80,000 signing bonus.
That is a staggering jump from the Cleveland salary. That is starter money for that era of the NFL.
It reflects his market value. He used the Plan B stigma to find a bidder who heavily valued his specific skill set, which was raw speed. Jimmy Johnson, the Cowboys head coach, tagged him as a, quote, probable starter, unquote. Think about the gravity of that. He is slated to be the starting running back for America's team.
But then the draft happens.
The Cowboys maneuver and select Emmitt Smith.
Talk about a plot twist.
But even then, Emmitt Smith was just a rookie who also held out for a while. Jones was the veteran with the proven speed. The competition was genuinely open.
And then tragedy strikes. First week of training camp.
He tears his ACL in his right knee.
It's devastating.
Absolutely devastating. He misses the entire 1990 season. And while he's going through the grueling rehab process, Emmitt Smith goes on to become, well, Emmitt Smith.
It's a massive what-if moment in sports history. If Keith Jones doesn't tear his ACL in that camp, maybe he starts the season. Maybe Emmitt sits for a bit to learn the ropes. Maybe history looks entirely different.
We will never know. But the injury problems didn't stop with the knee. He rehabs the ACL, which is a horrific process in 1990. Then in May 1991, he ruptures a disc in his back.
So now he has a surgically repaired knee and a ruptured spine.
He undergoes back surgery, specifically a discectomy to remove the ruptured portion of the disc. He starts the 1991 season on the physically unable to perform list. He finally manages to pass his physical in September. And what do the Cowboys do?
They cut him.
They release him immediately.
And this leads us to the final and I think most intellectual part of this deep dive, the arbitration case. Because Jones didn't just quietly walk away. He fought back. We really need to dissect this arbitration case, specifically Jones v. the Dallas Cowboys. Because on the surface, it looks like a standard dispute. Player gets hurt, player gets cut. But the timeline you highlighted in the source notes suggests something much darker regarding medical ethics in the early 90s.
It frankly borders on medical malpractice by modern standards. Let's look closely at the dates. Jones undergoes that back surgery in May 1991. The medical standard of care at the time required an 8-month recovery window before absorbing the kind of impact inherent to professional football.
Okay, so 8 months puts his safe return date around January 1992.
Correct. But Jimmy Johnson, who is in the middle of trying to build a dynasty and has zero patience for unavailable assets, approaches Jones in August, 3 months post-op.
Wow.
He effectively issues an ultimatum past the physical and play or we release you.
Put yourself in the player's mindset here if you're listening to this. You have a spine that is literally still fusing or healing. You have a legendary coach threatening your entire livelihood. And you have the inherent volatility of the Plan B system we just discussed.
Jones tries to comply. He pushes the rehab to the absolute limit. He manages to pass a physical in September, which many experts later argued was a complete formality. But as soon as he is cleared as fit to play, the Cowboys cut him.
Wait, break down the logic there for me. If he is declared fit to play, why cut him then? And if you wanted to cut him anyway, why force him to get fit first?
This is the exact legal loophole the Cowboys tried to exploit. Under the collective bargaining agreement, if a player is legally classified as injured, you cannot cut him without providing an injury settlement, which usually equals his full salary for the year.
Oh.
But if a player is classified as healthy, you can cut him for a lack of skill and owe him absolutely nothing.
I see. So Johnson needed Jones to be declared healthy on paper solely so he could fire him without paying out the guaranteed money on that $800,000 contract.
That was the core allegation, yes. It was a deeply cynical maneuver to clear the financial books. Jones filed a formal grievance, arguing that while he might have passed a rudimentary physical place, he was not functionally recovered from the severe injuries sustained while employed by the Cowboys. He argued the healthy designation was a total sham.
And the arbitrator actually agreed with him.
They did. In 1993, he won an arbitration settlement of $200,000. That was exactly 1 year's pay from the contract. The arbitrator essentially ruled that you cannot artificially accelerate a biological medical timeline just to save the franchise money. The $200,000 reward wasn't just back pay. It was a validation that the Plan B era couldn't completely bypass basic human labor protections.
It's a fascinating, if brutal, case study. It really shows that Jones's greatest victory in the NFL wasn't scoring in the end zone. It was sitting in a conference room, reading the fine print of the CBA and demanding his rights.
That is the ultimate tragedy of his professional career. He won the legal argument, but he lost the game. The human body just couldn't hold up to the violence of the sport, regardless of how fast he was.
So when we look back at this entire journey, how do we summarize it? We have the end zone phenomenon in Omaha, The blinding 4.33 speed, the dominance at Nebraska against teams like Colorado, and then this jagged, incredibly painful NFL experience.
It is a story of incredible peaks interrupted by the cold, hard limitations of biology. He had the pure talent of a Hall of Famer. I really truly believe that looking at the film. When he was healthy and on the field, he was electric.
But durability is a skill, or perhaps just a stroke of genetic luck that he simply didn't have in the pros.
He is still ranked very high on the Nebraska all-time list, sitting at number 17 as of a few years ago. So the legacy in Lincoln is incredibly secure.
It is. He is forever a Cornhusker legend.
But it leaves you thinking. We spend so much time in sports media celebrating the guys who make it to Canton, the guys who managed to play 15 seasons without a major surgery. But for every one of them, there are countless players like Keith Jones.
And that is exactly the question I would leave the listener with today. When we look at sports history, we focus almost entirely on the survivors. But how many Keith Joneses have there been? Players with Hall of Fame talent, world-class speed, and incredible drive, whose careers were defined not by their actual ability, but by the unfortunate timing of a single ligament tear or a ruthless contract dispute. It really makes you look at the game a little differently on Sundays. It's not just about who is the best athlete. It's about who survives the meat grinder.
Exactly. It's a game of attrition.
That is all for this deep dive into the complex life of Keith Endzone Jones. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.